Resilience requires redundancy, alternatives, and backups. It means being adaptable, valuing the marginal and the marginalized. Resilience is only possible through understanding root causes, feedback loops, and systems. That's what we're trying to do here tonight. The more ways we have of meeting a need, and the more ways we have of working together, the stronger we'll be as a community. We survive and thrive together, not as some may think, as isolated individuals planning for disaster on their own at home, but as a community that insists on a better future for all. So tonight, the focus is on understanding the issues, the risks, and challenges that we face. This is a discussion of the issues, not of politics, and we aim to keep the focus on facts. So I hope you'll leave tonight with a better understanding of these issues, as gaining knowledge is the first step towards starting to think about solutions that work. Further be encouraged by the fact that we have packed this room full of people who care about reuse. Great. So for tonight, we have invited a fantastic panel of experts to speak to us today. So first up, we have Bode Esan from Greater Cambridge Joint Waste Service. So over to you, Bode.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I've got just two slides, if I can please come up. What I'm hoping to do is just set the scene for this discussion in terms of trying to define what is a linear versus what is circular economy, and then what's the overall national policy context, and then we can begin to zoom in into detail about what's going on locally here in Cambridge. So to the first slide, please. So there's a concept which I'm sure, just waiting for the right slide. It's this one, yes. Yeah, please. The next one, please. So there's a concept which I'm sure we'll all agree with, that the way we produce, we consume, and also dispose of our goods has a very, very big impact on the amount of waste that we generate. That's general concepts. And there are two general models. One is a linear model and a circular economy model that shaped how those products flow through society. So in the linear model, we take resources, typically virgin materials, we make products, and then we produce waste which we dispose of. This is very, very resource intensive, generates quite a bit of waste, and most products have a short lifespan. Quite often we rely on virgin material. There's an alternative model, which is the circular economy. We do make products. Quite often we make those products from recyclable material. We use them, but also we continue to use them for quite a long time. So we return them, we repurpose them, we recycle them, we repair them, and then disposal is only a very, very last resort. That's how we use those products. It's very resource efficient. We minimize waste, or we actually try and eliminate waste that's produced. And then typically there's a very long product lifespan, and the products are designed for durability. And we rely less on virgin material, we use a lot of recycled products. So that's general principle of a circular versus a linear economy. And then on to the next slide, please. So what's happening nationally? Quite a few things. So there was a national waste strategy, resource and waste strategy published in 2018, and this sends the right signals in terms of ambitions to double resource productivity, eliminate waste that's produced by 2050. So it has the key anchors there in terms of moving towards a circular economy. And there was the Environment Act in 2021, again, creating a basis for resource efficiency. One of the biggest instruments was EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, putting a very huge onus on producers of packaging to actually reduce the content and also the increase the recycled content of packaging, making packaging much more usable, recyclable, and reducing packaging as well. That's not been implemented, and we're going to talk a bit about that later on. And then there's a tax also on plastics. So a lot of the products that we make, they are packaged in plastic. There is now a tax that really puts an incentive of producers to reduce the weight of those packaging products. There's a circular economy task force that's been mandated to look at an overall strategy and begin to move us towards some targets by 2030, 2042. There's also a deposit return scheme that should come into play by October next year. Many people here are familiar with the idea of buying a product, but taking your own bottle or packaging there and then getting your material into the refill. So basically, you buy a can of Coke, you don't get a bottle of Coke, you take your own empty can, and then you get a bottle of Coke back. That's not quite in place yet. It's quite popular in Europe and other countries. There's a trial that we have in Cambridge already, which my colleagues talk about that as well. But that scheme is to be implemented by October next year, we hope. There isn't a lot going on yet, but at least the signs are there that that's coming next year. And then on a more general level that affects everybody, one of the ways we can improve the lifespan, improve the quality of recyclables we can collect is by reducing contamination. One of the biggest proportions of contamination in recycled waste is food waste. There's now a mandate nationally for local authorities like ourselves to collect food waste separately by April this year. So in doing that, we're taking out one of the biggest contaminants from the dry recyclables waste stream and hopefully making recycled products a lot purer and cleaner. And therefore, they can be much more recycled and reused. So that's already in force. We're already collecting food waste from some areas in Cambridge as of January this year. And we hope to roll that out by the end of this year across both service areas. So that's the national context. There are a few things happening locally. We have some policy instruments. We have anchors there, but there's a lot that's going on practically on the ground, which I'm sure myself and colleagues will be discussing in more detail shortly. That's me.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Next, we'll move on to Jarvis from West Suffolk Council. And he'll be talking about the reverse vending machine scheme that's being installed at Parkside.
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me out of the Badlands of West Suffolk back to my hometown, Cambridge. And I'm going to discuss the scheme that we've been working on there and the DRS and its implications for this country, and also from a Scandinavian perspective. I am a proud Anglo-Finn. And my journey into circularity began in 2022, and it was actually inspired by walking through Cambridge. Now, what struck me that day, and if you've ever walked through Quayside on a Saturday afternoon or Jesus Green, was the detritus, the waste, the bottles, the cans outside King's College, bottles, cans, overflowing bins, defiling our beautiful city. And I thought back to my childhood in Finland and the pristine streets, no rubbish anywhere, no bottles and cans. And this is ostensibly because they've had a deposit return scheme there for, I think, about 75 years. We're way behind. And it makes a massive difference. Now, if you don't know how this works, Bode just gave us an outline. Each bottle and can has a deposit, you bring it back to the machine, you get the money back. Now, it instantly puts value on the products we throw away. It's a very, very simple, very effective way to improve our recycling rates. And I thought, why don't we have these machines here? I mean, it's, you know, it was so obvious. And I thought, well, I'll just get some, shall I? I'll bring them into Cambridge and try and start a scheme, a deposit return scheme, a reverse vending machine scheme somewhere, somehow in the UK. I thought it'd be quite simple. So I thought at the beginning. Now, as a private citizen, you realize pretty quickly that your leverage is limited. And I remember Billy Bragg always said that, you know, protest songs and protests have no agency. And I never understood what he meant until I started to do this as a private citizen. And you can bang the drum and, you know, it's difficult, you know. So I had the opportunity in 2023 to run in the local elections in Newmarket. And I thought, well, yeah, why not? Give it a go, see what happens. And I did win, thankfully. And as soon as I did that, I was able to then approach the private sector companies who had not rebuffed me, but there was nothing much they could do with a private citizen. But when I had the backing of West Suffolk Council, we got that scheme together pretty quickly. But the one thing that was kind of, I couldn't the blind spot when I was trying to do this is how do you incentivize this scheme without a deposit, without putting value on these things? So we devised a system whereby you bring the bottles back to the machine, you get rewards back from local or national retailers. So it's essentially the same. It's not a deposit, but the effect is the same. People get something for returning their recyclables. So I'm pleased to say that in February of 2024, 6 months after becoming a councillor and a year and a half after I had the idea, we did establish the first scheme of its kind in Newmarket. Now, the reason it was in Newmarket is because I was living there, and the challenges of doing it in Cambridge at that time were the size of the place. And I thought, well, nobody comes first. It's the old adage in Newmarket, apart from horses and Tories. So I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And amazingly enough, not only was it taken on by West Suffolk Council in Newmarket, in Bury St Edmunds, in Haverhill, Sudbury, Ipswich, Northampton, but it was incredibly well engaged with by the public. And we have the idea behind it was basically to, of course, increase recycling rates, but crucially to change behaviour, to educate not just the public, the council, businesses, stakeholders, schools, colleges, and get them prepared for what will be the biggest recycling rollout in British history. Now, coming back to Cambridge, I'm very happy to say that with the help of Cambridge Council's district and city, we have put a machine into Parkside College. So I did it. It's modest, but I'm thrilled that we've got Cambridge involved, because this should be a regional exercise. This can't be just West Suffolk or here and there. It's got to be joined up. And regional councils need to work better locally, especially when it comes to matters about climate change. So just to go back to the DRS briefly. So when it comes here to the UK in 2027 October, every bottle and can will have 20p on it. Now, what that does is immediately when you see 5 cans on the ground, it's not 5 cans, it's £1 or £2 or £3. If you go to Berlin, if you've ever had the pleasure of drinking all day in the sunshine in a Berlin park, you'll see at 7 p.m, every single bottle and can has been taken away, and you won't see one on the street through basically adding value. Now, value, this changes the psychology, changes behavior very, very rapidly in societies, right? So, these schemes have consistently delivered return rates in the high 90s across Europe, and the result is transformative. By adding value to items we throw away, the psychology changes immediately. Rather than seeing rubbish, people see value. Now, we've all seen Quayside, I'll go back to that, on a Saturday afternoon, or Jesus Green. Now, if we had 3 or 4 reverse vending machines there, and people are queuing up, taking those bottles and cans back, it would transform that area and the whole of Cambridge. So in terms of the impact on Cambridge, it could radically transform our close environment and transform the Cambridge experience for tourists and locals alike. So the system needs to change. And when it does, we should be able to walk through our cities in the UK with the same pride as the citizens of Stockholm, Helsinki and Copenhagen. Now, the evidence for it is that 35 plus countries have, it's not just popular in Europe, it's ubiquitous in Europe and Northern Europe, right? So we're so far behind, and we're catching up. For perspective, the Norwegian white paper on the deposit return scheme was 1 page. 1 page. There you go. Let's get on with it. So I think, it's a case of, it's not a case of complexity, it's a case of courage. And resilience isn't, endless paperwork or, it's really about the confidence to act when the evidence is already clear. And these are proven systems, and really we shouldn't second guess them too much. We need to get going on this, and of course we're getting there. As Bode said, 2027 will be the time this takes place. Now, as we said, reverse vending machines can take our recycling rates higher, but what really matters, and this is crucial, and it's what fascinates me and why I'm driven to do this, it's the chance to change behaviour. Now, we're decades behind Scandinavia, and this is because they have been socially engineering environmental and sustainability resilience for the population for decades, 100 years. Now, resilience is not just policy, and it's not recycling schemes, and it's not just councils. It's a state of mind and a collective social responsibility. And in order to make real progress towards net zero, we need to be willing, enthusiastic, and invested in our planet. And we need to see firsthand how we can make a difference. So right now, it's crucial we get the basics right. And in a stark kind of contrast to that, or as new and far more intrusive mitigations become necessary in the future, and they will, and as we face more dangerous climate challenge on Earth, and we will require society educated, willing, and unified to rise to the challenge. Now, that is true resilience. Now, we've got a start in Cambridge. We've got one reverse vending machine. It's a start, but it's not residence. We're talking about resilience here in Cambridge. Let's get 2, 3, 4, front-facing, build familiarity, visibility, public confidence. Because resilience is not reacting at the moment of change. And I think Cambridge is really good at anticipating and being forward-thinking. It's preparation. And for context, and this is not an indictment, but it shows the challenges. It took a year to install one machine in Cambridge because it's difficult. It's difficult to find a venue. It's difficult to find stakeholders. And if you think we're going to be rolling this out in every town parish in the UK, you can imagine the challenges that are going to come. So we need to get ahead of it. Now, the pilots that we've started in West Suffolk, it's controlled preparation, right? There's no second guessing. You put them out there, people learn, oh, first it's a curiosity, then it becomes part of the infrastructure. And in West Suffolk, we're DRS ready. We all know how it's going to work to a, you know, as far as the information we begin from DEPL and the DMO. But if we can get this pilot, if we can engage it a bit more in Cambridge, you're getting there. And remember, this is the cornerstone of circularity. And on my personal opinion, and I have spoken to DEFRA and the DMO about this, I don't think it will succeed if we don't engage councils early. I can't see it happening. And I would like to think if from the West Suffolk experience, we have a certain insight into this because we've actually done it. So I would say if we get the councils on board and we engage the public early, it's a go. I firmly believe that even though I've had to go into the murky depths of West Suffolk politics in order to get it done, I still believe that citizens will play a critical role in the ongoing fight against climate change. Look, there's a stark beauty about circularity and simplicity, about materials returning to use and about responsibility returning to people. The circular economy is not just an environmental mechanism, it is a civic act. When people return a bottle and see the value restored, they see firsthand that their actions matter, and that's how engagement begins. And that's how confidence grows, and that is how resilience is built. So if circularity conveys a special poetry to me, then it's symbolized by the scheme, which has followed a imperfect or perfect circle back to the place where I first had the idea, which is the city of Cambridge. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jan, for that. And next up, we'll have Kate Boursnell from Transition Cambridge and the Cambridgeshire Care Cafe Network. And just before we get on to you, I'd just like to draw attention to our timing system. So we'll be green for the bulk of your presentation, and then yellow when there's 1 minute remaining, and red when you're out of time. So Kate, if you'd like.
I just need to screen share your
technical. Anyway, thank you for coming, everybody. It's great that so many people here. I apologise in advance for people who will have seen some of these slides before in an earlier presentation. My name's Kate. I've been with Transition Cambridge and Cambridge Carbon Footprint for at least 10 years now. And back in 2013, we were doing skill shares in Transition Cambridge, which is a local community group with the word resilience in their line. It's towards local resilience. That's what the group is. And I came across Royston Repair Cafe, where they were taking things in from the public were coming to their events, bringing all sorts of things in and having them repaired. I thought that sounds like a really good idea. Maybe we could do one in Cambridge. So we did. We did our first one in the Friends Meeting House in Jesus Lane 2014. With a great deal of trepidation, we didn't know if anybody would turn up. We didn't know if we could fix anything. And it went fantastically well. And we realised straight away they had something very, very special going. We did, at the time, I hadn't even heard of the circular economy. I had heard of the word resilience. I didn't know what the circular economy was. And then we realised it was very special. We joined with Cambridge Carbon Footprint to make the network and began to think of rolling this out, not just across the city, but across the county. And at the moment, we have over 40, maybe nearly 45 separate repair cafe groups across the county. Next, please. And we think one of the reasons why these events have become so popular are not simply because people are getting their stuff repaired, because if you go to a repair cafe, you will enjoy yourself. If you don't, that's a bit weird. People do enjoy themselves. They get the stuff fixed, you can see. And they also gain skills, because one of the key things is that if you sit down with a volunteer repairer with your bike light, your transistor radio or whatever, that repairer will actually involve you in taking it apart, saying why it's not working. Oh, look, the battery needs cleaning, something simple like that, or this is more complicated. You as a person coming into the repair cafe will be involved in the repair. And I think that's actually crucial to why they are so successful. In fact, it overlaps with psychology that you were talking about. It changes people's relationship with stuff. So they very much do that. One of the other things about repair cafes is we feel they attract people who would never normally have gone to any sort of eco type event. We seem to get people in from all ages and all backgrounds who are keen to get their stuff fixed. And that means that I would say repair cafes give opportunities for a wider community of people to engage in community activities that do actually contribute to local resilience, almost by accident. We didn't set out to do that, but it was a sort of unexpected outcome, which has been very worthwhile, I think. So the next slide, again, more people getting hairdryer fixed. I think taking hairdryer to pieces, they're very common items that come into repair cafes. Next one, the sewing guy. And a lot of sewing, we have a huge number, probably most stuff is textile repairs. Maybe not. Maybe even Stevens, but there's a very high repair rate with textile repair. It has fantastic people who can do more than sew a button on. And it's surprising how many people can't sew a button on, because these basic skills are not taught anymore in the formal education environment. So we do manage to share those skills. So I think they're very successful because we bring people together in a friendly, cooperative environment. They usually get their stuff fixed. They often help. And to me, this is personally, I think this is really crucial. It gives them a sense of satisfaction and achievement because they haven't given up on the object. They've brought it along. They've invested time in sorting it out, and they go away, hopefully it's fixed, and they feel better about it. So it actually changes their relationship. It nudges them towards looking after stuff better, which is what resilience is about, of course. And of course, it can sometimes save them money as well. I think that's pretty much it, really. Oh, forgot the cakes. Crucial element of repair cafes is that usually we have lots of lovely home-baked goodies for people to enjoy while they're there. And I think that's possibly quite an attraction. The feedback is almost, I've had in my entire 10 years, 11 years now of doing repair cafes across Cambridge, I've had one complaint, and that was that the repairer talked too much. That's the only negative, wasn't you? That's the only negative feedback comment I personally have come across.
That's a bad complaint. I'm surprised you don't get it more.
So feedback is overwhelmingly positive, I would say. We even had one guy, possibly more than one person in the past, who's come along and said, well, I got my, whatever it was, fixed. Next time I'm coming again, even if I haven't got anything broken. It's so good. I've really enjoyed it. I want to come again. So I think the next thing is probably, is it that one?
Yes.
I thought I'd share some figures with you. This is from the Cambridge Carbon Footprint 2024 Impact Report, which is in full online on their website, and it is an excellent read. It's one of the best reports I've ever seen about anything, actually. We collect a lot of feedback, and we put our data into a centralised database. Yeah, so we know that 48% of visitors felt more confident to even try something themselves. And 80%, huge figure of them, felt more motivated to live sustainably. They came away with ideas of what they could do, not just repair, but in future use deposit returns, which I'm old enough to remember. As a child, we took our lemonade bottles back and got sixpence back. All sorts of activities where they can contribute to reducing waste and towards a circular economy. In 2024, we had over 3,000 visitors to repair cafes across the county. I would guess 2025 figure, or I would imagine. If you see how they've become more popular as we've got more groups established. And of the 2,711 items we saw, nearly 70% of them were actually fixed. And that figure, 70%, has been pretty constant over the years we've been doing it. That's round about half of the course, which saved 5 tonnes of waste because this stuff didn't go into landfill. And looking at CO2 figures, it's 35 tonnes of CO2 emissions avoided. That might be the end. No, these are the ones coming up soon. Some of them around the county. The next one actually in the city is the North Cambridge Community Partnership. That's at Manor. Sorry, not Manor, North Cambridge Academy at 1:15 next Saturday, the 22nd, I think. And there are lots more, and they're all on the Cambridge Carbon Footprint website.
Bookings recommended.
Very much. If yes, I would pay. It'd be good if you bought. Otherwise, you might not get seen. Yeah, and that's repair cafes, and I'm very happy to answer a question afterwards. That's helpful.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kate. Really enjoyed that. I'll just also note that there is another repair cafe at the Cambridge Room, which is, no, that's all right. I'll just call it out. So that's run by the Cambridge Retrofit Hub with a slightly different model, but basically the same deal. So next up, we have Guy Jones, electronics repairer with the Repair Cafe Network, coordinated by Cambridge Carbon Footprint.
Thank you very much, Helen. So you've heard a bit about how the repair cafes work. I want to share with you a bit of my perspective and how I think about the broader picture of what I've learned from doing repair cafes for since 2019 now. So how does a chemist end up being a repair expert? I have always had a bit of an obsession with waste and efficiency, and if ever one of my items would break, I take that as a personal insult. I simply refuse to accept that it would break and it will be taken apart, and I must understand why. And it wasn't until I discovered the concept of repair cafes in 2019 that I realized that actually this was a useful skill that I probably wouldn't get sued for if I offered it to other people, because I was genuinely worried that, well, you know, if I do something wrong, I am, after all, not technically a repairer, then I might get in trouble. When COVID hit, I was a little underemployed, and so I had a bit more time. I put in the local Facebook groups, if people are throwing anything out, would they give them a second chance, let me have a look at them, see if I can fix them. And I started repairing about 2 to 3 items a week, but accepting at a much faster rate than I could repair. My living room was full of other people's broken electronics. It didn't make me popular at home. And that has, I started logging it in a spreadsheet. So you can see at the bottom is the number of repairs that I get requested to do per month, or items that I repair. My kind of permitted exercise within COVID was to cycle around the town and look for skips and things that have been thrown away by the side of the road and see if I could autopsy those as well. And so over time, I really started to build up a very good understanding of sort of what's fixable, why things break, what usually goes wrong with a toaster, what usually goes wrong with a hairdryer, and got a really good intuition for how to fix things, but also more and more frustrated with how much the volume of stuff that just even I, as somebody who was not operating in any kind of commercial scale, could just come across all of this broken stuff. And that can only be a fraction of it. And I think that we have this kind of problem that, and to call it a problem is maybe a stretch because it's an incredible thing. We are very, very fortunate that the rate of technological improvement that we are living through has made access to healthcare equipment, to refrigeration equipment, much, much, much more accessible. And as technology improves, the sectors that can take advantage of that see their costs fall massively. And so televisions, bicycle lights, mobile phones become much more accessible. But sectors which are less able to scale, like law or healthcare or perhaps repair, are not able to take advantage of this in the same way. You can't open a factory in China that repairs bike lights, kitchen scales, thousands and thousands at a time, but you can open a factory in China that makes 10,000 kitchen scales every hour. And so we see this disparity in the cost of being able to buy things and replace them versus the cost of being able to repair things when they inevitably break. And in economics, this is called Baumol's cost disease, or the Baumol effect. You might have seen the chart on the right-hand side. So televisions have just become exponentially more affordable, while healthcare and things like that continue to increase in cost. So how does that relate to repair? Well, as I say, manufacturing is highly scalable, is highly able to take advantage of technological advantages, technological advances. On the right-hand side, there's really, really good data about batteries and solar panels at the moment. You see the grey line at the bottom. All of these trends look like they're moving in the same direction. This is the cost of installing solar panels, a large installation and a small installation versus the panels themselves. And they're moving in the same direction, right? But when you look at the numbers, actually, what you see is the cost of the panels themselves has fallen by 66%. But the cost of having the install done has fallen by only a quarter. So it's this labor component really is making up a very significant factor. And we see exactly the same thing with repair. The cost of getting a new toaster is £20 because they're so cheap to manufacture because of this incredible productivity improvement. But the cost of getting it repaired is much, much more disproportionately more expensive. Most of the items that I see and I come across are barely broken. It takes me, in 80% of cases, under 30 minutes. And admittedly, I have a fair amount of experience, but as anyone would if they've been repairing things for a long time. And yet they've come to me in many cases because people have already given up on them. They are just, a vacuum cleaner at the side of the road or something like that. They didn't want to pay or consider getting it repaired. A side note, non-rechargeable AA batteries destroy an insane number of devices because they leak. Don't use them. And so repair is very difficult to scale up. Skilled labour in the UK is £30 to £70 per hour, potentially plus VAT. The success of a repair is not necessarily guaranteed. So if you're running a repair business, you might have somebody's phone come in, you replace the screen, you've invested that time, the parts, and then you find that actually it also had water damage. And so you've got an unhappy customer who's paid for something that wasn't cost effective for them, when economically, why would you not just buy a new phone? As a rational actor, as somebody who is thinking, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to afford my rent, I'm struggling to afford food, the economics of repair struggle to make sense. And that puts us in a very difficult situation. On the right there is from my personal data. This massive column here is items that take me under an hour to repair. So really a lot of repairs of small kind of semi-disposable items are very easy to repair if you can get access to the right parts. And sometimes they're generic, sometimes forget about it, you literally can't. This bike light, the battery broke, it leaked. You just can't get the battery in the right size for less than you can buy a replacement bike light. And yet it's a perfectly functional. I ended up making it into a little night light, which goes under my bed and stops me tripping over at night. It took me about an hour to design the 3D printed part on the bottom. And so again, you see this disparity between the difficulty of repairing or reusing or preventing waste versus the ease of, the person, they just bought a new bike light. So how does this feed into resilience? Capitalism has this single overriding imperative that profit is its goal. And resilience within that for a business is, in many cases, not important unless it can either increase revenue or decrease costs. And we as a society do everything that we can to try and prevent crisis and disruption. And we absolutely should do that. It would be bonkers if we were, deliberately breaking businesses just to try and make them more resilient. And the problem that we end up with it then is that businesses don't prioritize resilience. They may think a little bit, they may plan a little bit, but if they make themselves uncompetitive by focusing too much on resilience, if they rent a warehouse locally that has a very expensive rent, they're going to become uncompetitive and they're not going to be able to sell as many items as their competitors, and they will eventually go out of business. And so the problem with this, the great thing about this is businesses are incentivized to keep costs down. Things have become less less expensive, and this has been an absolute boon for many people. But we put ourselves at risk. An unforeseen event, COVID was a taster of what that could look like, potentially can lead to localized or even complete system collapse. And so we maybe need to think about what we can do. Is communism our only option? I don't think so. I run a business. I've been very fortunate to benefit from capitalism. And I think that we can make sure that the incentives, just as Janne was saying, if you put the incentives in place and you put the right disincentives in place for behavior that harms or isn't resilient or is undesirable, then you can push people's behavior gently or strongly towards the outcomes that you want to see. And we do this all the time. We've got extended producer responsibility. We put tax and health campaigns around smoking to try and make sure that even within a capitalist system, we don't end up with things just completely broken and everybody having lung cancer. How do we do this without simply making things more expensive? As Kate said, we put our data into the Fixometer. This is used to campaign for right to repair legislation, which gets companies to think about how can we allow people to repair their own belongings. We might think about subsidies for repair businesses, perhaps a cut in the rate of VAT on repair, or perhaps that repair businesses are treated similarly to charity shops in terms of how they might pay business rates. And we have things like extended producer responsibility, which tries to reduce the burden on taxpayers and put it on the producers who are profiting from selling things without considering the cost of their disposal. But it's a big topic, and one of the things that frustrates me is I don't have a silver bullet, here's the solution. But it's certainly something that I spend an awful lot of time thinking about, and I'd welcome any questions that help me to distill and clarify my thoughts on it so that I can learn more about it as well as teach more about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation, and thank you to all our speakers. I'll just note we do have apologies tonight from Nicole Barton, who is supposed to be speaking about Swishes, a clothing exchange program, and unfortunately she wasn't able to make it tonight. But thank you for all that information. Really interesting to hear from all of you. So just to say, we are going to be writing a report that will summarize all the information that we've received tonight, and we'll be presenting that here on May 28th. And we'll have more time for discussion and networking at that time. So if you'd like to join us in writing that report or contribute to it in other ways, just get in touch with me afterwards. Okay, so moving on. With us tonight, we have 4 members of local government. And I will introduce each of them, and you will have 3 minutes, which will be on our timer, to either summarize what you've learned or to ask a question of our speakers. Great, and so first we have Councillor Rosie Moore, who is the Councillor for Coleridge and Council Member for Climate Action and the Environment.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for all of your presentations and your work on the circular economy in Cambridge and Suffolk, West Suffolk. My question is to Guy. Just on your last slide, you mentioned possibly some solutions to making things more repairable. I'm very interested in the legislation they have, I think it's in France, about making particularly electrical products more repairable. And I just wonder what you think about that, or what direction we should be going in, and what really we need to campaign on to get some of that here. I think although it's called extended producer responsibility, it feels like really that's just the first producer responsibility, and actually it really needs extending, because packaging, we can see it's made a difference already. So it's fantastic, but it should just be the first step. So just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so there's a really great organisation called the Restart Project based in the UK that is doing campaigning for right to repair legislation in the UK, and that we work with. So they host this fixometer that allows us to put our data into it. There is such a huge range of electronic devices and things that can go wrong with them. And I think in some areas there's really quick, easy wins. And in other areas it's much more difficult to do. For something like a mobile phone, where you're thinking about waterproofing, you're thinking about miniaturization, the CPU inside of this becomes obsolete after 3 to 5 years. So it is genuinely something that actually is the value of repair as high as, for example, a small, I don't know, fan that sits on your desk that doesn't need to be miniaturized. It doesn't need to be waterproof. Why has that got security screws in it and a completely unreplaceable battery? That's unnecessary. I have some level of sympathy with the, laptop and phone manufacturers when they're saying, look, it's going to increase costs. But for the torrent, the deluge of Temu knickknacks, that is where I see an opportunity to actually enforce repairability that would basically have no impact on the meaningful cost to people, especially as many of them are sort of luxury or non-essential items.
Okay, thank you for that. Next up, we have Councillor Richard Swift, who represents the West Chesterton ward.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I've learned a tremendous amount today from each of you. Just going through some of the points in order. From Bode, about the food waste, we've actually come across each other quite a lot over the last few years. And that's a huge thing, isn't it, food waste? So that was very interesting to hear the latest initiatives on reducing food waste. And of course, the food waste programme coming in very shortly across the whole of Cambridge. That's going to have a huge impact across the country as well. And then Janne, I remember as a child there was 6p, as someone said before, on Tizer bottles and things. That's one of the reasons I've got bad teeth, probably. So you actually got money back by taking the glass bottles back to your local sweet shop. And there again, so that's something that was actually very commonplace in this country and was lost. So I think that we can actually quite easily get back to that. I think it's a great initiative. One of the things I think most of us are particularly annoyed about is supermarkets wrapping all the vegetables in plastic. Everyone hates the idea that if you go to Sainsbury's or anywhere else, you can't buy courgettes, you can't buy onions, you can't buy anything unless it's actually wrapped in plastic. And the 30% tax on plastic, I mean, supermarkets should actually be held responsible for doing a lot more from their profits to reduce the use of plastic. I think the whole public would actually support that. If you look at plastic bags for taking groceries back, that was only, I don't know, what was it, 30 pence or something? Now everyone uses reusable plastic bags, and the idea of just throwing away plastic bags after one use is unthinkable for most people. Kate, I think that there's a tremendous thing, feel good to actually, especially with the sort of atomization of society, the destruction of community centres and community cohesion through lack of places for people, especially young people, to congregate. I think that the repair cafes and those ideas are, their time has come and they should be massively expanded if possible. And the more people that actually start to use them, the more they will actually be self-generating. That is absolutely amazing. And then finally with Guy, plastic wires. If you go to Butt Lane with a sort of broken hairdryer or something, the amount of plastic, electronic goods that are, unfortunately, the copper wires are completely integrated within the plastic. So you basically probably end up landfilling the whole thing rather than trying to extract the plastic. I don't know about that. Maybe you could tell us about that. That's something that's really annoying. One last thing is for Bode. The idea that we'll eventually, landfill sites, will be able to actually start mining them for sort of settled products that we can actually start to extract back, a little bit like fossil fuels in the future. Those are my observations. Thank you.
So if you'd like to respond, just take a moment.
They might not recycle the plastic very much from those wires, but they are desperate for the copper. And indeed, there is a national, or there was in October, a national campaign to try and get people to raid their cable drawer. I know you've all got one, and recycle their hoarded cables that are obsolete because of the value of the copper that's in those and how recyclable it is. At least, again, we come back to this like problem of capitalism. There's enough value in the copper to make it economically viable for that wire to be recycled. But recycling in this case means taking the whole device, putting it into a giant shredder. Any chance of repairability? Pff, gone. But that's how they make it economically viable at scale, because then you don't have this £50 an hour cost of labour.
Depends on the idea of mining landfills. I don't think it's going to be economically viable in places like here, just because of the cost of labor, like Guy said, but it's done elsewhere. So in emerging countries, people actually mine dump sites because the cost of labor is a lot cheaper. And those materials haven't been deeply buried. So they mine them as soon as it's dumped and they recover lots of valuable products from there. But I think here, trying to do it in landfills would likely be very, very uneconomical. So I think we need to start from going to landfill in the first place, rather than having to take them out much, much later on.
If I may, what you were saying about Corona bottles and Tizer bottles was a massive incentive for children growing up in the 70s and 80s. You know, there are so many aspects of Scandinavian environmentalism and sustainability and other aspects of society that could be transposed into ours. And you're quite right. There was a moment in our time when we were on that right direction, and for some reason that we stopped doing those things. But you're absolutely right. I think there is an overwhelming appetite in this country for people to get involved with like recycling if it's put in front of them. And I think the deposit return scheme will be one of the great successes this country moving forward.
Okay, thanks for that.
Can I just add one really small thing about the food in supermarkets? The government introduced legislation which is currently coming into force and you can see it taking effect, that forces, it increases the charge for difficult to separate packaging. And so you can see, I like avocados. You can see that a lot of the supermarkets have stopped selling the little cardboard tray with the clear plastic case, and instead it is all cardboard to make it that there is only one thing, so they get charged less, and it's therefore also very easy to separate. So it's another fantastic example of using these little incentives. You know, it's not a £1 million fine, it's like 5p per product produced, but it just changes the incentives and the economics and makes the producers think, oh, actually, maybe we could just wrap the whole thing in cardboard, because that would allow us to offer this very slightly cheaper than our competitors. And, you know, we're not going to have an end to capitalism. So let's make it work for us, and let's use the tools that we've got within the system we've got to do that. And it's happening.
Okay, moving on, Councillor Olaf Hawk from Trumpet.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for organizing this event and also for your fantastic presentations tonight. I think something that probably you all have in common is that you are not just asking for behavioral change, but you're also trying to facilitate it in different ways. And I think one thing, especially Kate highlighted that, I think if we want to change our behavior in a sustainable way, then we have to see the benefits. So people have to see the benefits, and they even potentially have to enjoy it. It's a bit like changing your diet or your exercise regime. With the best intentions, if you can't find something that you actually enjoy, you will not stick to it. And I think it's the same with recycling or with living a sustainable life. And unfortunately, at the moment, I think we see some from a certain spectrum, political spectrum at the moment, part of the political spectrum, some pushback against green initiatives, climate change denying, and all these kinds of things, waste of money, it doesn't make any sense. So I think we really have to make sure that people actually see the benefit. It's not just abstract. And it's also a bit like, I would like to compare it to litter picking. So just one person going for a litter pick is a bit sad, but if you see other people do it, it's a community event and people know why they are doing it and they're doing it for the local community, then I think it really changes behavior. And I think that's where initiatives like everything you've presented, I think are fantastic examples of how this actually can work. I mean, at the same time, I mean, we can only, even if we want to change our behavior, we can only choose what's on offer. So if, for example, I must admit, I like a chocolate bar from time to time, you know, only a chocolate bar will do. And then I have to go to the vending machine and I have to deal with the packaging that comes out of it, and makes me feel guilty, not just because I undermine my health, but also because I have to throw this in it can't be recycled. So how can we put pressure on the producers so that we actually get the right choice, so that we actually can make the right choice? We actually have the options available. I think it's been mentioned several times already. So how can we make producers reduce the packaging or use better packaging? I have no idea why Mars bars can't be wrapped in paper or something more sustainable. Can we include repairability as a constraint? I mean, in that context, I'm also thinking about not necessarily consumer behavior, but big topics here in Cambridge are growth of the city. We've just been through the consultation of the local plan. There's now a consultation on the, what's it called, Cambridge Development Growth Company. I think these are really going to shape our city for a long time to come. So these are really big issues. So I can only encourage everyone to participate in one way or the other. I was just wondering if you would like to comment, if you have something to say about that sort of big picture, that's kind of part of sustainability and a circular economy, if that can be somehow be pushed. Planning, for example, how can be circular economy principles be enforced in the future growth of our city? And I guess finally, I mean, I have to talk about communism and capitalism, I guess. I mean, as far as I can see, I mean, the communist systems that I'm aware of, whether in history or currently, I think they're among the biggest polluters there are. And you can't just stand up and criticize these guys. I mean, but, you know, I think we should appreciate what we've got at the moment here, and I think we should make use of the tools we have available. Everybody can participate here. So there's not this political class that just does things. Everybody can stand up and can get elected. And as we've just heard from Janne. So yeah, I can just say, I mean, great stuff. And I think everybody should be really feel encouraged after these presentations to start themselves and get involved. I think there wasn't really a question in there, apart from maybe the local plan, if there's anything in that context local.
Just one part of that. You mentioned the Mars bar, and I think my own guilty pleasure is potato crisp. And part of the challenge is that I think we need to try and influence a lot more of the product design. So typically in some areas, a packet of potato crisp, you can't really readily recycle the packaging because it's made of paper, but also foil. So most recycling plants will get confused because it's foil on the inside and sort of paper on the outside. Well, this can be easily fixed by having just one material. So that's influencing product design, which is what Guy was talking about as well. Also, blister packs. Again, this is designed to keep medicines very, very safe. But again, there are components in there, two different components, foil and plastic. It's almost impossible to recycle and it's very small. So I think part of what we can begin to do, like the packet of Mars bar, is begin to implement product design and just use a single material, which is possible to keep the material safe. And then it's a lot easier to recycle and recover them. So I think it's come back to the same thing about electronic components, making it easier for them to be separated and captured as a reusable material. So product design, I think, is a key element.
On exactly the same note, though, there are some things which I think are easy wins, and there are some which are more difficult. The reason, of course, that the crisp packets have this metallization inside is because that very, very thin layer of metal makes the packaging much, much less penetrable to moisture and oxygen, which means that the crisps stay fresher for longer. And so the thickness of the plastic you would need as a trade-off to remove that metallization is then, at least for the crisp manufacturers at the moment, deemed not economically worth it. And so there's striking that balance of, can we add a charge, as you know the government has started to do, for having difficult to separate materials, but also there's the kind of law of unintended consequences is, if this means that they have to quintuple the thickness of the plastic of the crisp packet, does that actually mean that they are then using 5 times as much plastic to try and make their crisp packet more recyclable? Where does that trade-off lie? And so I think there will be some things for which we have easy wins. Another one is cucumbers. I always just used to think, why is it wrapped in plastic? That's preposterous. It seems completely unnecessary. But if you take home 2 cucumbers and you leave one out of the plastic wrap, it goes bad so quickly. And food waste is a huge, in terms of tonnage, problem, which is why now we are having this incredible initiative to improve the amount of food waste recycling we're doing. So it's difficult to identify the easy wins and to separate them from the ones that are either economically not viable or actually genuinely the alternative could be environmentally harmful.
Okay, so next up we have Councillor Karen Young, Councillor for Queen Edith and member of the Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you. It's been really fascinating. I've got 2 kind of questions, and for anyone who wants to answer, is there we've got the repair cafes. Is there an area, and the deposit return scheme, is there something else that we could be doing? Is there a gap in our recycling? And then the other question, particularly maybe from Bode, is there something that you would ban? You know, is there a particular, what's that? Oh, right. Yeah, so is there something, is there a packaging or a substance, I don't know, like plastic, say, that you would ban?
You want to go first?
No, please.
One of the things that we are trying, the group of people who are involved in repair cafes and other aspects of anti-consumption, I suppose, is a library of things. So that when people wanted, I mean, the classic one, you say you want the whole, but you don't want to buy the drill. So we would, one of the things that Cambridge Carbon Footprint is trying very hard to do is to establish a library of things in Cambridge where people can borrow stuff, possibly pay a small charge, do whatever they need to do with it, and then take it back. So that's something that is there's definitely an appetite for that. It's hit a bit of a brick wall, I understand, at the moment, but there's definitely an appetite for that. And well, there was another one that I can't think of. Oh yeah, tool sharing, but it's not quite the same. There's already, actually in Queen Edith, there's already a person who will lend out tools. So it's sort of on the same spectrum as a formal library of things. So you don't go out and spend money on a Black & Decker or a Bosch or whatever to clutter your garage. Please don't come and see my garage. You actually borrow the stuff and it gets shared. So more sharing, basically, simple as that.
Regarding what you were saying about recycling and is there anything else? Are there other things? Well, I think deposit return scheme is kind of a precursor to circularity. Now, where other countries are moving forward beyond this, for instance, is well, I mean, bio waste in Sweden is fueling a lot of its public transport. Reuse is huge in Sweden, and also in Denmark, in Aarhus. Now, this is something else that I've been trying to bring this way. What they're doing, and this is where circularity becomes interesting. I mean, there's capitalism and then there's greed, isn't there? They're probably two separate things, but circularity brings everything closer to home. So, case in point, in Aarhus in Denmark, what they do now is they have machines around the city where people go to their coffee, go anywhere, Costa, whatever it would be, and you find one of these machines, you bring the coffee cup back, you get your money back. They are then picked up, washed locally, and taken back to the coffee machine, the coffee houses by the morning. So what you're doing there is you're creating jobs, you're lessening your carbon footprint, you're preventing more materials being made, and these are reused. So in that respect, the thing about circularity is it's the sky's the limit really, and the simplicity is the key to it. But if you can take the capitalist restraints off, or the greed, we can still do amazing things. People talk about Scandinavia as socialist countries. No, they're not. They're high-performing free market economies with high taxes and social responsibility. So yeah, I think once we get the basics right, yeah, we can. The sky's the limit. Yeah.
I will try not to say ban, but if I had my way, I would say so. I don't want to be too communist tonight. I grew up in Nigeria, and most things were sold in the marketplace, and you didn't have packaging. So what you do is you bring your own bag or your own container. You bought all food stuff was weighed out. So cereals, grains, rice, onions, peppers. When we go to supermarkets here, why can't we have the same thing? Most times you buy the same thing of the food products. Why can't we come with a container, weigh it out, and you don't have any packaging? So I'll encourage that sort of behavior rather than say ban the packaging. But I think it's possible. I grew up on that basis. So I would like to see us move towards that sort of environment where you bring your containers from home and you weigh out your products and you just take it back, no packaging involved.
Just on the repair cafes front, I really wish that we could do more with charity shops, because I think there's a big untapped opportunity there which connects people with things that are pre-loved and working, that cost less than they would otherwise, that didn't need something manufacturing. But as a person who repairs such a volume of stuff, I very often find when I go to a charity shop with a box of now working electronics, they say, I'm sorry, we don't have the capacity to process this. We won't, or in some cases, I've started to learn what they can and can't sell or what will and won't shift. But even if I'm giving them things that will shift, I often have to call around 3 or 4 charity shops to say, would you be able to take this at the moment? And they are, one of their problems is that they are dealing with this torrent of things that people didn't really want or need in the first place. And so they're having to process that, and it's then difficult for them to kind of sort through things. And I, again, don't have a solution, but I see an untapped opportunity there of a distribution point for things that are lower cost and very low carbon footprint because they're pre-loved. And I don't know how to tap into that.
Really interesting discussion. Okay. So thank you to the councillors for taking the time to be here tonight. So we'll be moving into general Q&A in a minute, but first, so here we're discussing resilience. It's really important to think about the future, right? And so the future belongs to young people. And we would like to offer the floor now to the youngest person in the room. So if anyone would like to step forward, we would encourage you to do so. No takers. Okay. If any of you do know young people who would be interested next time in coming and talking to us, next time we'll be doing flooding, but we're open to listening to any sorts of input about what is important to young people. Please let them know, get in touch, and we can coordinate that for next time. Okay, so now we're doing general Q&A. So the way this will work, please raise your hand. Charlie will be running our Q&A, also incorporating questions from online. So please raise your hand if you have a question. Seats that have the mics, you just press the button on the right to speak, and then you'll be on mic and on camera. If you don't want to speak on the mic but have a question, we have some sheets of paper around, so you can write down your question, bring it to me, I will read your question, and then it can be asked. What else? People online, raise your hand, Charlie will coordinate it. And if you can, please address your questions to a specific speaker. But I know our speakers all have experience, and so we'll see how that goes. Okay, so Charlie, if you'd like to.
Wonderful, thanks so much. I'll just quickly say a quick word to say that the report we mentioned will be on the 28th of May. We said 28th. 28th of May will be the report coming out. So yes, has anyone in the room got any question they'd like to ask? Saw your hand over here, please. Yeah, if you just turn on your mic. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name's Jackie. I work in a food retail shop in the city centre, and I've got 3 drums that I have been banging over the years with anybody who will listen, basically, but I haven't had the focus to be able to go and make a career out of it. So these are chill packs that have been exponentially appearing in far greater quantities than they ever used to be, I think, since lockdown, with the advent of food delivered to the house. We have quite a lot that come into us from suppliers. I have a cheese shop, so fresh and chilled food needs to have refrigeration. And I was at a party about a month ago with some good friends who saved their Hello Fresh recycle chill packs. And they said to me, can you take these? They do that every year. And this year I said, I've got so many now from various other sources that have come through. I haven't got the space to store them. And I feel that this is absolutely one of those things that have appeared, which are so recyclable. They're also quite easy to dispose of because they've now got like, you know, stuff you can flush down the sink, or just slit and open and sprinkle on your garden, and you're just left with a small amount of plastic. But I still think there's a lot of appetite there for those being reused. The second one is, this is a real bugbear of mine, compostable plastics. Compostable, let's say, because currently I'm not aware of any recycling facility that can deal with those at scale. Therefore, all of that compostable stuff has to go into black bin waste. Thank you. I'm so pleased you would. Are there any plans of any of the people in the waste streams? Have they got plans for addressing that? Because the market has been saturated with those plastics again since lockdown. Can't do anything about them. Can't really wean people off them. I mean, we do try. We've got glass bottles, glass jars that we offer for people to do refill of olives and things like that. But it's a small drop in the ocean. I think we need to address what's actually happening with those and why has it not happened yet. And my final one is with the food waste collections, which I'm thrilled about. For all the fact that we are a food shop, we don't actually produce much food waste. We manage it quite carefully to sell off before it does go bad, and we're religious on it. It's an important value for us. Would there be any way of organising some kind of street, I'm talking about for business communities really, where businesses may not produce a huge amount of waste, it's just maybe like, you know, lunch, banana skin, you know, half-eaten sandwich, that kind of thing. Not enough to warrant or even be able to afford the cost of a food waste bin at scale. Would there be any way of creating some kind of street-wide collection per street of food waste from these people? This is your food waste bin for these businesses on this street. That could be, I feel that could be a good way of, I don't know what the numbers are, but I feel that that's something that could be addressed. Yeah, and thank you ever so much. So interesting, so glad I came, thank you.
I'll take the last question. I think the simple answer is yes, but I think the way that would work is you would have to maybe group together with other businesses and agree on using one container. Absolutely no reason why not. So you'll all agree to share a container and share the cost of that. And then we as a service, we just empty that container. So I think that's very, very practical and very, very possible.
Can I reply on that as well as the councillor? I think also perhaps if people, we'll talk about it, but there could be, since we're rolling out the household collections and the weekly, there could be something around if you have the commercial service, you have just a smaller household one. So that's a fantastic idea and we'll definitely look into that. Thank you.
Any other responses from the councillors now? We'll come to questions in the, we'll come to a question online. Seems fair after one in the room. Kirsten, if you're still there, please unmute and ask your question if you're happy.
Hi, thanks very much. Yes, I am still here. This is a question for Jamie. I hope you can hear me. I hope the connection's all right. I was just curious, you mentioned various town centres for your system. How can parishes outside the centre of Cambridge best engage if they want to take the scheme forward in their area? Because obviously they're smaller communities, but there's some very big villages around the South Cambs area, for example. I wondered, is it something that you would suggest we club together, or have you any sort of feel for that?
Good question. A lot of this comes down to, you know, infrastructure. I mean, I've been quite fortunate enough to work with companies who are forward thinking as far as the infrastructure and the machines are, and they're not cheap. But there's nothing to suggest that, for instance, Cambridge City Council couldn't get ahead of the game and buy 10 of them, 20, buy 10 of them and start maybe, you know, what we've found in West Suffolk is that once we put the machines in and we've trialed them and we've got them established, they are now part of the infrastructure. They're not going to go anywhere. So actually it wouldn't be preparing villages outside Cambridge with a machine, or there are other smaller mitigations that you can do, would not necessarily be a waste of money. It would be something about putting infrastructure in place in advance of the rollout, which is coming, and which we are again, mandated, we will be forced to comply with. So lobby your local councillor, give them an email. I think, look, Cambridge is forward-thinking, brilliant council. And again, with West Suffolk Council, this is a collaboration. And these are incredibly powerful things to collaborate like this. And I think once the ball's rolling, I think we can, look at extending this idea into smaller villages. Like I said, we've gone to places like Haverhill and Sudbury. So they're not villages, of course, but I think preparing for this and getting the public on board, and even if it's taking a machine on the road or the idea, the concept, and this has been talked about, and showing people and taking them to schools, I think, yeah, absolutely. It could be a very positive kind of initiative. So good question. Comes down to money. A lot of these manufacturers of reverse vending machines just want to sell the machines. Some are quite happy to see the bigger picture, but thank you.
Thanks very much.
Hiya, we will come. Any more questions in the room? Yes, we'll come to these two people. So to go for the lady first and then to the gentleman after.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the presentations. My name's Vanessa and I'm here partly representing the Cambridge Reuse Social Enterprise. And our remit is to try and distribute furniture to people on low incomes. We also have a sort of business side that tries to generate money in order to support that. But I have another hat as well. I teach at the university and I do quite a lot of training, and skill development, I think, is one of the things, a sort of theme that's coming through. So my question is partly to Bode and partly sort of in terms of Repair Cafe and also the link you made to charities. There is a huge waste stream of goods that is being dropped at recycling centres, many of which are perfectly serviceable and many probably need very small repairs. If there were an organisation that were willing to take on trying to rescue some of those, train local people up with, sort of in conjunction with repair cafes to be able to fix things, partly for skill development, partly to divert stuff away from a waste stream and then distribute it throughout the community. Is that something that would be possible and something that people would have an appetite for?
I've got an appetite for it. I struggle to go to the Thriplow Waste Centre because I lose myself staring into the electronics waste thinking, my God, if I could just get out there, I could fix it. I know I could fix it. So yes, there is, but Cambridge Reuse is one of the charities that I will approach when I've got a big box of electronics, and sometimes you are able to take it and sometimes you aren't. And I think there is some part of the challenge collaborating with charity shops is getting people to, instead of buying that knick-knack from Temu, to go and buy it from the charity shop. But because Temu's marketing budget is about 10 billion times larger than Cambridge Reuse, that is a challenge in itself. I will very often fix things, and this, a case in point, like useless knick-knack, took me probably, I spent an hour and a half turning a bicycle light into a night light, but doing it as skill development, something I enjoy doing. So I think, yes, there's an opportunity there. Yes, there are barely broken electronics going to the dump. And yes, charity shops would be able to sell those items. And then it's just connecting the dots of how can you rehome that item, and rehoming items is something that I often struggle to do. And I think that is the missing link actually in that. And I assume that it wouldn't be too much of a barrier to, because of course the municipal waste centres, the rules are you cannot take away any electronics. Doesn't matter how much you beg or plead. I've tried. But I assume that if it was being done on a professionally organised level, then that barrier would just dissolve. And then I think the challenge becomes, how do we rehome these items?
Can I add to that? I've come across, and I really cannot remember which university or universities it is or are. There are places where, because you've got a huge turnover of every September, October, people are vacating their lodgings or whatever, halls of residence, and dumping their stuff. There are places in the UK, and I wish I could remember my car, where there is a system in place to reclaim and reuse those things. It might come to me. If it does, I'll let you know. Yeah.
That's where half of my broken stuff comes from on my bicycle rides.
I'll just add that I think there's a BBC program that does exactly that. And I often catch the tail end of it. So it's possible. I don't think that's, I think it's only limited to furniture. I don't think they're allowed to capture electronics, but there's a program that does that. Practically, I would say yes, but I can't really give a definitive answer. Sorry, because as a district council, we don't run those centers. So that's run by the county council. Hopefully in the next 2 years, you won't have that challenge anymore after LGR. We'll all become one unitary authority. So those centers are run by Cambridgeshire County Council, not by the district council. So I can't really comment. But I'm sure that there are health and safety reasons for that. But nothing is impossible is my own view. But I'll take that comment back to the county council and maybe follow up with you.
Thank you. And maybe if when people were dropping stuff off, instead of it being dumped into the skips, there is a separate pile for, you know, serviceable items that could be used. I know obviously they do sell some items there, but if it were just a sort of structured process, it would be easier to keep it out.
I mean, it does feel to me like a liability issue is why they won't let the general public take away electronic items. They happily rehome golf clubs, bicycles, things like that. But my gut feeling is that if Veolia or whoever runs that waste site were satisfied that they were not going to be liable if there was a problem, then that problem's just going to go away. And I think repair cafes are a testament to that. If we can get insurance for somebody, I don't have a qualification in repair. I've done an online pat testing course, but I'm a chemist. There's no reason that I should be allowed to fix things. But if we can, as repair cafes, get insurance to run, public liability insurance, etc., then I don't see any reason why this would be any more difficult than that.
I think the key thing is what you said is the liability.
Yeah.
Because once it comes to that premises, they are then liable. If it's done elsewhere, it's nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
So I think that's a challenge, but I'll pass that comment on.
Thank you. And over to this gentleman here.
I'm John. First of all, thanks for an absolutely brilliant and inspiring set of talks. I'm very conscious, just having had that last discussion, of how brilliant it would be if all charity shops were actually geared up to help recycle electronic items. I can remember taking a really lovely lamp that I was given, but we had no space for, to a charity shop here in Cambridge. It was accepted. It was only later I discovered that the person who'd accepted it didn't realize they weren't actually able to accept something electronic. They just had to go to the bin. And that was a great, great shame. But to come on to the basis of my question, we've been very focused on what households can do and households collections and a bit of local business. But what I'm thinking about is what Bode and Jamie were telling us in terms of the way regulation has changed and the prospects for it. And I looked at the waste strategy some years ago. Of course, what's left out is the construction industry waste. And I've been dealing with buildings throughout my professional life and seen the fact that if you've got an old building, it's built of lime mortar, you can reuse the materials. If you build in cement, you waste the brick, it can be used once, and then it goes to landfill. You can have some fantastic changes if only you build in a way that allows things to be reused. And this is not high tech, it's actually the most basic builder skills.
So I'm the cabinet member for planning and transport, and we, in our emerging local plan, we recognise that the circular economy really should apply to the construction industry. And one of our hopes is a policy for where there's on the larger sites that they will have to talk about the circular economy and talk about how they will deconstruct the buildings at the end, and they will take into account carbon for the construction and also recycling. But you're absolutely right. We've got a lot to learn from the traditional buildings, and any new modern methods of construction really need to be thinking about recycling and reuse. That's what we're really hoping will come through as quickly as possible.
I have a very, very brief comeback. Thank you. That's brilliant, but it doesn't deal with the basic issue of the individual building, the individual craftsman, repairing at the local and individual level, and a culture and a tax regime where VAT is charged on repairs. And this is something that some of us have been campaigning to change for about 40 years without success. And we've got to get those incentives and regulation working in favour.
Thank you so much. I'll come to a comment online, but I might actually just convert it into a question. Come into a question online that I'll convert into a comment, because I think we've touched on it a bit already, and they wanted me to read it out for them. So the construction industry produces 62% of all waste across the UK, and according to this comment. What are your proposals to support the growth of a local circular economy and create the skilled workforce needed to expand, repair and reuse of construction materials and components? And if I convert that slightly into a comment, is we need to plan for local infrastructure through storage of good quality recovered materials for reuse, education and training, incentives of the construction sector to commercially adopt reuse, which I think is an element of what the gentleman over here was talking about. So we will move on to the next question. Thank you for the question online just there. Is one that we'll send in early, pre-prepared, but I will try to give it some context into the conversation we've had today. So we've heard about repair cafes, which are fantastic. We've also heard about the beginnings of a library of things that could really support that element. And one thing that I know some people in the room know about, but helpful to put on the record, as it were, is about clothes swaps. So it's sort of a way for people to be able to swap unused clothes with each other. I know amongst a fantastic Cambridge student network of people, they do clothes swaps as well. But one of the things that can often come out at the back of that, oh, sorry, I've got a comment I wanted to include here, which is that people might have seen on BBC News or other mainstream media available, that there was a Cambridge designer brings clothes back to life repair shop. People might have seen that. And so there's an example there of local businesses who aren't necessarily here in the room talking about that. There's an event on the 5th of March for anyone who's interested in that. Come and chat to me. But where I'm going with this question is about textile recycling. And oftentimes the volume of clothes that can be left at the end of clothes swishes are the ones that people really just don't want. That can be a problem. So I just wondered if anyone on the panel had any, the question was if anyone on the panel had any insights into textile recycling and the problems around that in the region.
One thing I can think of, Charlie, is that, well, two things. First of all, there's been a lot in the press recently about the actual rubbish quality of many of the clothes that are selling and people are buying. So there's a whole psychology, and I'm not trying to be critical, sorry, but there is a whole psychological thing there about what you buy and why you buy it and how often you wear it and so on. And I'm minded to recall, I think what Vivienne Westwood said some years ago now, which was to buy less, choose well, make it last. And that's something which doesn't seem to be in the sort of psyche at the moment. And I've forgotten what the other thing was. It was about textile recycling, wasn't it? It was the council used to have a thing called Scrap Store, which was, I think, discontinued in what may not have been a cost-cutting exercise, where you could take things like, well, when you make something out of cotton or something, you always have a bit left, a remnant, and you could take your remnants or whatever it was to the scrap store on Barnwell Road, and it would be available for local schools, for example, to go in and get those remnants for free for use in craft activities. The local print people would send their newsprint, unused newsprint. Schools and youth groups could go and get free stationery effectively. I took loads of stuff there once, but it's not there anymore. And it was a very, very useful service. And if that could be reborn, as it were, I think that could be quite a good contributor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I should add the comment, I read it out poorly, was this event is of relevance, which I want to bring up here, is that there is a Transform Trade, the Big Brew event happening on Thursday, the 5th of March, at the Bakehouse on Grantchester Road, which is looking at the focus on the need for a fashion watchdog. So if you're interested in anything around that, that's on the 5th of March, Transform Trade. Come and chat to me afterwards and I can send you the details. So next I'm going to come to question in the room. Any more questions? Come to this lady here and then the lady behind at the back.
Hi, thank you so much. That was incredibly insightful. I wanted to chime in on the conversation about electronics and waste. So I'm Sonia. I am a co-founder of a startup to help households resell, refurbish, or recycle their unwanted electronics. And a point I want to make that we came up with, which is a huge problem, is data security. So a lot of these devices, these old devices, you can't turn them on anymore. Even if you can turn them on, you cannot wipe the data unless it's done professionally. And so if you were to, I think we should chat because I think it is, but if you were to go into how to sort these electronics, the data is a primary concern for citizens. And so now I want to ask a question to Bode and to the councillors is how do you actually address this? Because many people, I mean, the amount of times I've been to CX and they would just refuse taking someone's laptop because it's not resellable. But also at these waste facilities, they just won't take these devices because of the data on them. And so what happens is that if these devices are left, then the data can be taken quite easily if you know what you're doing, and then sold to an AI, to scammers. So this is a big problem that has been solved by IT asset disposal companies, and it's a very big market, but they only serve corporates because that's the processes that they have. They prefer large amounts, large quantities of the same type of device. So if that were to come, if IT asset disposal companies could easily delete the data for small businesses and citizens, that would be incredibly helpful. And yeah, so what solutions do you currently have in place for that? I would really be curious.
Can I just go we are talking about laptops and phones, those sort of devices. In the service area, Cambridge City and South Cambridge District Council, we have pink, purple bins in different locations, and those bins do take laptop devices and phones, and those are taken to specialized units for recovery and for disposal. And also, I think in terms of the data, my understanding is that once you put your product out to be disposed of, it's no longer yours. It's a waste material. So basically, there's an onus on the person disposing, yes, to wipe up the data, but I don't think there can be any comeback on them for accessing that information. So once you've said you don't want it anymore, I believe, stands to be corrected, that that data doesn't belong to you anymore. But we do have facilities, about, I think, 15 bins across the area, purple, pink bins, you can't miss them, that people can dispose of their laptops in.
Yes, very much aware of those. When we did a pilot, so we collected 860 kilos of electronics in 5 pop-up events. And the number one question that we had is, are you going to delete my data? How are you going to delete my data? So when I say, if you put your phone in one of those bins and someone finds them, so your iPhone that's 5 years old that might not turn on anymore, that might still have your credit card information, your health information, all your contacts, and people just do not feel comfortable putting those in pink bins. That, I mean, I have also been at a pink bin disposing of stuff, and someone was looking through them because there's valuable items in there. So if someone finds a phone and so as a citizen, even myself, I wouldn't know how to like fix an old phone, but some people do. And those people might not have the best intentions. So yeah, this is what I'm saying. It's a big problem. And that's actually what Material Focus has also identified, is that people just don't know how to get the data off. their devices.
It's a very valid point. I'm not sure I have the full answer here, but definitely I take that on board. I would expect that the company will use just one company. They take out the data and they don't reuse it. I would expect that as a minimum. But I'll verify that and just make sure that that data is not accessible. Yeah.
We sometimes get people at the repair cafes who want us to help them make their data safe so they can dispose of the item. So it's definitely a concern. And there's, you know, in cases where it doesn't turn on and we can't fix it, they go, okay, well, I'll go and put it back in my drawer for another 10 years until I figure out what to do with this. So it definitely is an issue for people with like phones and laptops and things like that.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And to the person back, thank you. Oh yes, you have to grab a microphone. Thank you.
Hello. I might have missed it, so apologies if it was covered, but could you talk a bit more about the finance for the deposit, the reverse recycling? Sorry, my brain is fried. Yeah, because I don't feel like that was covered. Like, where does that money come from to pay people back for those items?
I didn't cover it on purpose. No, that's actually very simple. I mean, it's when I say it's the cornerstone of circularity. Now, it's like a bit like doing this because it's so simple, but they effectively go. So the consumer takes it back to the shop. They get the money back. The shopkeeper will get it from the manufacturer. The manufacturer will get it from the DMO, the deposit, the central deposit people. So basically, it's Peter pays Paul, goes round in a circle. Now, these should be they're non-profit organisations in Scandinavia. I think they're a hybrid in Germany, and the one in the UK is predictably very corporate. But the essence is the same. This money will just go round and round circles. So there are some councils are predictably kind of concerned about the revenue flow, where they're going to get money, what's going to happen to recyclables. Each bottle that has been processed will have a handling fee. So, for instance, if Cambridge had 4 reverse vending machines on quayside, they'd keep the handling fee and that kind of thing. So there's that. Also, councils, a lot of people won't. I mean, I'm kind of contradicting myself. Some people won't dispose of them properly, and the council will be entitled to take the revenue from the deposits from that. So the idea behind it is really nobody's supposed to profit out of this, you know, essentially. However, what it does do, and another great benefit of circularity is, now this is all up in the air, and I can only tell you what I know, but for instance, we're talking about collecting these bottles. Who's going to collect them? I mean, is it going to be a private concern? It could be the council. The councils could be paid as agents to collect the bottles and pay, you know, or, you know, some bright spark might start a company doing it, but it will create jobs. That's one thing it will do. It will create jobs. But it's not supposed to be for money, but councils will find a way, you know, just got to start thinking about it now. How are they going to make up the revenue lost from recyclable materials? But we can't let that get in the way, because that would be cynical, wouldn't it? So, you know, yeah, it's an interesting question, but generally it's meant to be non-profit. So it just goes round in a circle, and it incentivizes everybody. I mean, everybody to play ball and keep that. Eventually, it'll be, hopefully, what we'll have is these items will be resilient and will be much easier to be a single use. And remember, now we're going to be pulling out bottles and cans out of the waste stream as well, so that will make a difference. And councils will save a lot of money from street cleaning. That's one of the things from bottles and cans. So there's only upsides, I think, really.
I can just add to that. It's a fair comment, but I think it's a very, very big area of concern for us as a council. This is coming into force October next year, and the finances is not clear yet. So there's a cost of collecting. Who's going to pay that cost? There's a cost of processing. Where's that money going to come back? So there's still very, very many questions. The EPR regime took many, many years, and that took a lot of analysis. So the government now understands what materials are collected at the curbside, what's the composition. They did a lot of studies. And based on that, they can now estimate that, okay, if you're in this particular area, we expect you to collect so much plastic, cardboard, paper, and therefore they can apportion that cost back to plastic and all the producers. And then they then pay the net cost of collection, treatment, and processing, and they pay us directly. We've already gotten the monies for last year and for this year. So that's already worked out, but that took years. Now, a small component of that will leave that stream and go into DRS containers. There's been no analysis done that I've seen yet. There needs to be collectors, there needs to be processors. We don't know who's going to pay for what yet. And it's coming into force next year. So yes, councils, we're very keen to do this, we're ready, but the money has to come from somewhere. And that circularity isn't quite clear yet. We know what needs to be done and how, but who's going to pay for what and where and how isn't very, very well defined just yet. Hence why we're doing a trial here. I did a trial in Cambridge to understand what are the costs of collecting, how often is the bin going to get filled. We're going to understand that from one location. Replicating that across the whole service area is a whole different ballgame. But hopefully we'll get that before next year.
Thank you so much.
Can I just get in there quickly? Just say he's absolutely correct. And that this is, again, goes back to why we need to get on with it now. So we can, these questions, these big gaps of knowledge are filled before we go live. And Bode's absolutely quite right. A lot of these questions haven't been answered yet or dealt with.
And something I would just like to add for this, which is relevant here, is part of the report, including this event and all the other ones, part of what we are calling community articles is we will be offering up everyone who's attended or signed up the opportunity to add their comments to the draft. And they'll be essentially written up into a normalized narrative, and of course included speakers so they're comfortable. But at that point, if you want to add your name to the report or add anything you think missed, that'll be an opportunity to add that in there. We'll try to capture everything here, but we want to make sure that everyone's voices are heard and you're acknowledged if you want that. We shall try to get that in place. We are coming up to the last few questions. So there's no more online, I don't believe. If there's any more in the room, we'll come for this gentleman here in the corner.
Hello, my name's Gordon. I've spent the last 14 years working on innovations around circular economy for small island states, particularly the Maldives. And so we've been looking at all different aspects of waste, all the different waste streams, and thinking how they can be solved at a small scale. I'm interested that, as far as I understand, most of Cambridge's waste is managed by one company on the outskirts of the city, if I'm right. Are there opportunities for small businesses to get involved in more decentralized waste solutions, or is that, have I got it right, that that's really the model that's that we're under here in Cambridge?
The collection of the disposal.
Yeah, collection, segregation, recycling, food waste processing, those kind of functions that are provided for all the households of the city.
I mean, the collection statutorily is done by the district councils. So I'm not sure there's a space there. The processing is done by the county council. Well, those tend to be fairly sizable contracts that are tendered.
Yes.
So the contracts for the landfill, for treatment, for composting, for recycling, that's tendered as a whole. So I think the opportunities for smaller businesses will be in the sectors like we talked about today, the repair cafes, the textile recycling. Those will be the areas.
Okay.
There is, I see what you're saying there, and hopefully, I'm hoping with local government reorganisation, when things come back to something cogent, which they're not at the moment, these we'll have a clearer idea of who's going to be doing what. And I'll give you Newmarket as an example. We've set the tone here for being at the pioneering certain recycling schemes. We don't have a recycling centre in Newmarket. The county council won't give us a recycling centre. This has been an ongoing advocacy for me and for other councils. It's not political. This is about climate change and declaring a climate change emergency and not providing the very basics. So up until 2000, when the county council got rid of it in 2011, For 8, 9 years, it was run by a charity in Newmarket, open door charity, no tender. They were doing it. They were taking care of all of it on site. They closed down in 2018 due to profitability and stuff like that. However, it did work for a while. So there was definitely there's still a please come to Newmarket, open it up. We'd be more than welcome. So Bode is right. It is generally county council district, but there are grey areas. Absolutely, I've witnessed them myself.
Thank you so much. I will come to you for a second, guys. I'd actually like to come to Guy for a closing comment. I'm going to put you on the spot, and not a closing comment before we pass back to Helen. Oh, you wanted to talk on this point?
Yeah, just really quick on that. I think for example, the pink bin scheme is run by a company called Wiser Recycling in Norwich, and as I understand, they're not like some huge national corporation. It's a small company that recycles electronics and tries to recover value from it like that.
Sorry, can I just,
Please go.
I think it depends what your company is wanting to do. If you're wanting to offer a sort of new stream of recycling, then there could be opportunity for that. If you want to open an alternative landfill, realistically, that's not going to happen. But if you've got a sort of novel, different recycling stream, for example, for material, we would definitely be very keen to speak to you.
So we're going to have one final question, and I'll be passing back to Helen. And I'll say it first, and I'm going to quickly come to a comment to give you guys a small bit of time to talk about it. We've talked a bit about the right to repair, and I thought it would be interesting in your view, just to give us a very quick synopsis, literally like 2 minutes, of what the right to repair is, and where it will apply, and what are its limitations. I know that's a lot. But just a really brief one, and this is more for the general awareness of the room. And I will just add last comment to councillors that is helpful from online, is that restaurants and cafes are a big source of waste from single-use drink and food containers. Something the council could consider is working with these businesses to require or encourage them to shift practices. For example, requiring cafes to use reusable containers or offer reusable containers, sorry, or offering discounts to some customers which bring their own containers, which is an interesting thought. But I'll then hand over to Guy. You literally have 2 minutes.
My specialty, I will say, is overriding when I don't have the right to repair. It's that personal insult of ripping things apart. But if I could try to summarize it for you, the right to repair is about giving people or rather not withholding the information that people might need to repair their belongings, not withholding the availability of parts from people because they're not professionals. It's about trying to prevent companies from putting barriers in the way of people repairing things that they have bought and they own and that belong to them. So it's not necessarily about forcing manufacturers to give everybody a screwdriver when they get their washing machine. It's more about thinking, is there a manual that says what's the number of this part, this sort of weird circular thing in here, what is that, where would you get the replacement for it? Yes.
Very quickly, this right to repair issue would never have happened if certain companies hadn't already started to do that 15 years ago or thereabouts. Putting screws into things that could not be undone with an ordinary screwdriver, withholding software updates from tractors. Is it John Deere?
Yeah, John Deere.
John Deere, people were sold in the American Midwest, of all places, were sold tractors they could not repair because what did they do? They did something.
The problem, especially for farmers, is that they were locked in and they had to use a John Deere engineer to get their tractor repaired, because only they could use the software codes to remove the fault codes on the vehicle.
Yeah.
But if you're in the middle of harvest and it's going to rain in 2 days and your John Deere engineer can't get there for 3 days, that is a big old problem.
So it's quite ironic that this sort of right to repair almost started in what many over here would regard as, the American Midwest, put it that way. So we're going further than that. And that all led to the whole iFixit thing, which many of you will know about as well. the open source of manuals and alternative manuals, which has spilled over into a fantastic fixing website, probably led to starting. And there's now a whole community on YouTube as well, where repairs really caught on. That would not have happened probably if people hadn't put the barriers there in the first place. There's probably a lesson in there somewhere.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. And I would just say that if anyone wants to do one thing to go away from this, is just have a little look online at what right to repair is. So it's a good place to start. And I'll hand now back over to Helen for some final parts.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. So tonight we have had our appointed listener being Peter Pope. And we'd now like to invite him to give a 2-minute summary of what you've heard and what you're taking away from this evening.
Thank you, Helen. I'm not sure if I can cope in 2 minutes, but I'll do my best. You introduced the concept of resilience, describing it as bouncing back as a community rather than being an individual process. You mentioned the word redundancy. I think we need to clarify there. This is not about people losing their jobs. This is more an engineering definition, meaning having systems where there are backups. Something fails, there's something else there to pick up the slack. Bode then described to us the transition we're going through from the linear to the circular economy, underpinned by ongoing extensive legislation. But the process of recycling is not a simple machine where you put in the waste, you turn the handle, and good things come out of the other end. Because you have to have a good quality waste stream, which is free of contamination. And he then moved on to describe the deposit return scheme, setting the scene for Jarvis to tell us what's happening in West Suffolk. And it's notable here that, of course, Cambridge is the centre of innovation, but this is an example of an innovation we've had to import. And he came out with some useful phrases as well, like resilience is a state of mind and recycling is a civic act. Moving on to Kate on repair cafes. Another idea we had to import to Cambridge from Royston, apparently. And here's an example of a scheme which is going very well. There are now 45 repair groups across the county. And this isn't just a matter of getting things fixed, it's a matter of education. People come in from all ages and backgrounds, and there's a general sense of achievement in carrying out repairs. And all of this is quantifiable. So, for example, in 2024, there were 3,000 visitors, and it's fun. That Guy Jones, he described himself to us as a chemist with an obsession with efficiency and waste. And what he's into, what the repair cafes are into, is skill building. But when you're trying to compete with all the new stuff coming onto the market, and you have labour costs of between 30 and 70 pounds per hour, it doesn't work economically. But bear in mind that many repairs are very quick. So that there are some quick wins, some low-hanging fruit. And we need to be looking at nudging processes to encourage behaviour change and incentives like taking VAT off certain processes. Towards the end, we were starting to get a bit political. There was talk about capitalism, and that is obviously going to be an ongoing. And a general discussion, very far-ranging, difficult to summarise. But odd things came out like plastic, isn't it horrible, even though we're terribly dependent upon it. Charity shops are being overwhelmed. There is construction waste in vast quantities that we need to deal with. There is clothing and fashion. There is the problem of data, which is embedded in devices, which is a security problem. And then there's this grey area about the funding for the deposit return scheme. It has to be non-profit, but just where does the money come from in the first place? These are all things that still need to be resolved. Thank you for all the contributions.
Thank you for that, Peter. Really nice wrap up of what's happened here today. So I'll just say some concluding remarks here. So thank you again to our speakers. Thank you to the counselors. Thank you to all the volunteers who have made this happen. Charlie on tech, running our online space. And everyone who was helping earlier today. Thank you to Katie Thornborough for helping make this possible. Thank you to the council for letting us have this space for free. And as I said earlier, after tonight, we will send out a link to the recording. We do have the link to the first one. I have the recording. I have not put it up yet, but I will do that hopefully before the next event, along with this one. And you can share that with your friends, listen to it again, and so forth. Our next event will be in 2 weeks on February 25th on flooding. And we encourage community groups to attend and to use the space on the balcony to talk to people ahead of the event and afterwards. So if you would like to do that for next time, please, you're welcome. We have some flyers around here for the Resilience Web and for our next events. Please take those away with you, share them with your friends, and so on. We encourage you to visit the Resilience Web. If your organization isn't on it, please add yourselves. You should find that easy to do. And just to say again that the Cambridge Room will be opening again next week in the Grafton Center. So please visit that and enjoy it. Okay, and so lastly to say, this event has been produced on essentially zero budget. So if you would like to make a donation, it would be very gratefully received to help us cover our printing and advertising costs. So we'll have a basket outside and also a QR code where you can donate electronically if you'd like. Following on from this event, we would love to host a more in-depth workshop on solutions, kind of looking at all of these issues, not as individuals, but as a whole system. If you would be interested in funding that or sponsoring it in some way, please get in touch with us, me or Katie afterwards. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. And we will please continue the conversation on the balcony so that the staff can help clean up this room. They're staying late to accommodate us. So let's help make their jobs easy. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.